Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. I'm Mark Stein, Thrive founder and your podcast host. We're creating sustainable, inclusive, and multi-generational residential communities. Our mission is to combat the epidemic of isolation, revitalize communities, and help others discover the many benefits of engaged community living by offering unique and ecologically sustainable co-living options. In this podcast series, join us as we discuss co-living, in addition to bringing you interesting people from around the world who are doing cool things to expand your knowledge and satisfy your curiosity. Through this podcast, learn more about our concept and see how Thrive co-living communities will bring together people from all walks of life who want to enjoy the best of independent and group living. To find out more about us, please visit our website at thrivecolivingcommunities.org. Thanks for watching and enjoy the podcast. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. Glad to have you back. And I want to welcome my guest today, Naima Ritter Figueres. I'm not rolling that R very well, but anyway, glad to have you here. She is a co-founder of Conscious Coliving, a consultancy around co-living with an emphasis on facilitation and community engagement. She also lives in a co-living community in Costa Rica. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that. And so glad to have you on. And after a long time trying to get our schedules together. So thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So let's talk about what led you, a little bit on your journey that led you to this point of your focus on co-living.
Yeah, sure. So well, it really started through my own experience of loneliness several years ago. I've been very lucky to, I studied public policy and international development. And so through that, I've been able to live and work in many countries, including Bangladesh, Guatemala, Philippines, and, always very exciting. And also often feeling this sense of loneliness, of wanting to connect, of wanting to have community around me, of having these deep friendships, and often just not feeling that. And at one point really going into quite a depression about that, crying every day, and just really feeling that need for connection. And then when I came to do my master's in London, I was living in this amazing community of students, international students, called Good Enough College. And I was like, wow, this really just feels so what I've been craving. And through a mindfulness group there called Wake Up, I met a friend who's an architect and also interested in co-living, and we just started exploring co-living as a solution to loneliness. And we began doing research and events, and went to visit the Collective, which at that time was the world's largest co-living in the world, where we then met our future co-founder colleague, Matt Lesniak, who was there at the time doing a fellowship. And so we started visioning, what does an ideal co-living look like, and putting together what is now the Conscious Coliving Manifesto, which is all about connection with ourselves, others, and nature at the heart. And started presenting that at conferences, and people, came up to us afterwards and said, this is great. This is really what we think the industry needs, but how do we do this? How do we actually create spaces that foster that connection? And so that gave us really the impetus to say, okay, this is a need, and to start kind of creating conscious co-living around that, to really foster these kind of spaces and communities.
What year was this that you started Conscious Co-Living and started promoting this?
2017 was when the first group of us got together, and then 2018 when we presented the manifesto at the Co-Live Summit in Paris, was when we all really clicked together. My partner Juan came, and Matt Lesniak was also there, and thanks to Ryan Fix, one of the grandfathers of co-living, we could say, he helped connect us. And yeah, so 2017-18 was kind of the launching point.
And then, so you're living in a co-living community in Costa Rica, and what's the name of the co-living space?
It's called Stolas, Stolas, Stolas Co-Living in Los Joses, which is in the capital city, San Jose of Costa Rica. And
what's the website? Is it solas.com?
It's stolascr.com.
Okay. Stolascr.com. All right. And tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so, well, it started off with one house. Now there's two. The first house has 14 rooms. The second has 10. And when my partner and I first arrived there, it was more of a guest house for international students who were coming to study at the local university. But this was during the pandemic, because we came to Costa Rica to run some workshops at a festival, and the pandemic hit. So it was all a bit of a surprise. And they were really struggling because there were no international students coming in, so they didn't have anybody staying there. And so we said, hey, have you heard of co-living? And they were like, no, but tell us about it. And so we supported them in kind of getting into the space, changing their name first from guest house to co-living, getting on the coliving.com website and a few others. And so, yeah, it's a mix of international and locals. And most are between the ages of early 20s to late 30s. And mix of some students, lots of people working remotely, some people doing internships in the area. Interestingly, it's attracted a lot of people who in some way are, working on human rights or environmental things, or Techo por mi país, which is about supporting local neighborhoods and creating houses. So it's kind of naturally attracted that. We're in process of creating an onboarding, more standardized process for that, which we think will really support in creating more alignment actually within the community. And let's see, what else can I share? So there's two garden spaces in our house, and we've been really activating that in the last few weeks and months. Also really feeling this urgency on learning how to grow our own food, given a lot of the situation that's happening in the world. And it's been fun to kind of feel empowered and learning in this way. And we also run, there's yoga classes twice a week. There's a ping pong room, so there's lots of ping pong. You very often hear like, yeah, people getting very excited, sometimes some tournaments. And it's cool because that's in like a multi-purpose room where the yoga and the ping pong and dance sessions happen. We also have a market called Stolas Market. So we have the residents have our own kitchen, and then there's a commercial kitchen. And yeah, maybe good to just re-clarify that at Stolas, I'm a resident. I'm not actually part of the operations or management team. But we've been kind of supporting just from the side with kind of co-living ideas and things. But yeah, the kitchen is great because we get discounted meals, almost every day for the residents that are home cooked meals. So that really makes a huge difference. There's somebody who supports us with cleaning and it's nice because we're quite friendly, the staff and the management. There's a nice connection. It doesn't feel like this hierarchical thing. It feels very kind of vertical, and friendships that form, even doing trips together and things. So yeah,
What
that's a
about
little.
programming? What type of programming are you doing? Wine tastings, those sorts of things.
Yeah. There isn't anything that strict or formalized right now. One of the main, it's also another source of revenue, is organizing trips with the residents and also with friends, of the people organizing who are the managers of the space. So Costa Rica, is a destination country. So people on the weekends love to go out into nature. So that's kind of the main programming that happens on the weekends, but also sometimes going out dancing together. Sometimes there's often events that are hosted at Stolas, concerts, like small concerts. We're hosting local artisans come and do kind of a pop-up market, little like freebie sessions where people come and bring stuff they want to give away in exchange, which is quite cool. But we are actually working on programming to have more events and workshops, especially from the angle I'm bringing to that is to support us in learning how to have a more conscious lifestyle. So bringing people who are teaching us about, how to eat healthy, how to exercise healthy, yoga, meditation practices, learning about gardening, breath work, many of those kind of events that will support us in living more healthy and holistic lifestyle.
And Costa Rica is known for being such a progressive place. So I can see how you would be drawing the different types of people that you talked about, and people looking to learn those sorts of things while there. So with your conscious co-living work, I know that you focus a good bit on facilitation, community engagement for co-live and conscious co-living. You're running some support circles for community managers. So just talk a little bit about what your thoughts are around engagement. And that's something, community engagement, having people feel empowered, working collaboratively. That's real important in our concept as well. So just talk a little bit about what you pursue in that way.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, it's actually one of the other things we love doing at Stolas is circles, whether women's circle, men's circles, or community circles, and we're hoping to bring more of that into our programming. And in terms of community engagement, something that's coming out a lot from these community facilitator support circles that you're mentioning, that we host with who want to come together and support each other through challenges and share wisdom. So anybody welcome to join those. They happen on the first Thursday of every month. But yeah, community engagement often comes as one of the biggest challenges, right, in co-living spaces, because community is, the sense of community is such a key, it's like at the heart of what co-living is actually offering, right? I mean, yes, co-living offers convenience, but really people also are coming for that connection and that community element. But you can't force community, right? You can't just put people into four walls and say, here you go, get together, hang out. In some cases, maybe that works to an extent, but there does need to be an element of facilitation, to support a sense of connection, of safety, of trust, of vulnerability, where people can really connect and begin to engage with each other, and as a community. And so some of the biggest mistakes we see in terms of community engagement is first, not asking for input from residents. What would you like to see here? What kind of events would you want happening here? What kind of topics or interests are you interested in? And so that's a huge mistake, because you're missing out on the element of the people who are actually there to help organize events that would get them engaged. Yeah. So another one is kind of adopting a top-down mentality, kind of a management approach, which we often see, in the hospitality sector with, hotels that organize events and just expect people to come to kind of imposed. In co-living, and to really create that sense of engagement, it needs to be co-created, which is related to what I just spoke to about before. Also, even from before people arrive, there's an important element about how you're curating people coming to the space. So are you asking questions to see what people are interested in, and encouraging them to bring their gifts, their interests, their skills to also share and make a part of the community spirit once they're already there. So that element from before is really important to get people engaged. And then, this might sound obvious, but one big challenge is just not having spaces, communal spaces or shared spaces where people can actually hang out, where people feel comfortable going, that are easily accessible, where the lighting isn't terrible, where it doesn't smell bad, or, how do you create that physical design element to actually encourage and nurture people to come together? And then finally, there's this challenge around creating a sense of trust and of safety. First at the physical level, right? If people are constantly worried about things being stolen or whatever, that doesn't create for a healthy, engaged community, but also at the psychological level. So we really promote spaces of non-judgment, and where people can really be fully authentic and expressing themselves without feeling judged, which is such a common element in our kind of mainstream modern society, this constant judging of each other. And so that's one of the more subtle elements of how do you create that space of non-judgment. And that can happen through the onboarding, through events, through one-on-one conversations, through communications that you see around. There's several ways to do it. So those are some of the main challenges. And one other way that I really am a huge oh, go ahead. I'll continue in a moment.
No, go ahead. One of the areas.
Yeah, I just really want to talk about circles as well, because circles are, from my experience, one of the most powerful ways to really create deep vulnerability-based connection and relationships with people. And circles are basically, for those who haven't participated in a circle, they can happen virtually, but in a co-living space, you would be sitting in a circle. And the guidelines that make circles happen is, number one, they're confidential. Number two, we speak from our own personal experience. We practice active listening of others when others are sharing. And we're not trying to coach or fix anybody in circle. We're merely giving a space for people to be able to share and be open and honest with what's going on for them. And I could talk about circles all day, but it's definitely something I bring to co-living and encourage all to explore.
Very nice. And I've been exploring just how difficult it is. And I'll just give an example of if somebody is in a partnership, has a partner, spouse, that it is so easy to separate ourselves from one another over very small things, and our differences once we in a new relationship, once we've gotten beyond the "oh, I can't believe it" phase, then we start looking at differences, and it can be very simple. For example, um, one person doesn't put up their uh, grocery items that they pulled out to make a meal until after the meal. And the other one, it's more important to put it up back in the refrigerator immediately so it doesn't spoil. And just the judgment that comes from that, like, um, how could you not put it right back? It may take you 30 minutes to eat, and that cheese is going to sit out on the counter. The separation that comes from that judgment, and it is a judgment, is so powerful, and you can see it at work in your at play in your relationship for the
Yeah.
next hour or two, or maybe it will last longer. And when you think about how difficult it is to be in a partnership, you really see how difficult it is to live with people that you're not intimate with and don't have as much of a connection. And it makes total sense when I look at it in that way. And I'm currently living in a condo situation, pretty traditional condo situation. It makes perfect sense of why we live as separately as we do, given how quickly we come to judgment about other people. Um, so I've also come upon the concept of radical acceptance, Tara Brach's book.
Her.
And now she mostly focuses on radical acceptance of ourselves as the root. But when I was in a conversation with someone recently about, he asked, what's the biggest possible pitfall in co-living? And I immediately said, I think the inability to radically accept each other is so. When I see how easy it is to separate ourselves on an interpersonal level with our partner, it really points out the challenge of bringing larger numbers of people together. And it is so ingrained. It's about, and I think in Western cultures it's worse because we've got this value of rugged individualism, individual, what's in it for me first. Whereas in Eastern cultures, they're more focused on the interest of the whole. So I think it's worse with us. I don't know what are some of your thoughts around that?
I mean, I love Tara Brach. She's a huge inspiration, and I totally agree with you that I hadn't thought about it that way, but that, yeah, one of the main reasons we probably live so isolated is that we're constantly judging each other, and we can't stand, dealing with all of that. Although then we're secluded to our own family judgments, or our own, if we're living on our own. And this points to, not just developing that culture of non-judgment, but also of communication, right? And how do we communicate to each other in a way that expresses, our feelings and our needs, but isn't judging or blaming or criticizing the other person. And this comes to the practice of nonviolent communication, which I'm a huge fan of, and I would encourage every single co-living operator to have all the staff trained in it, and ideally all the residents trained in it, because it really, makes a huge difference if there's that shared common language, that shared vocabulary. And really it's almost it's like another consciousness, of how to engage and be and communicate. And so communication challenges are definitely also at the core of um, community engagement, not really flourishing. So yeah, those would be my kind of thoughts on that.
I also think that selection of people in the community is important. For example, well, and I'm beginning to think that it takes a certain let's just talk in terms of Maslow's um, hierarchy of needs. I think that if somebody is just at the very lowest, and I don't mean this in terms of with any disrespect, but if someone is just focused on putting food in their mouths and their kids' mouths and making a basic living, I'm not sure that they can operate at that level of communication. It takes a level of sophistication or emotional intelligence to be able to not take everything personally and literally. And so I'm beginning to think that maybe the selection, I also value self-selection, that people that want a certain experience should be able to have it. But in terms of success in a community, and you mentioned mindfulness either before we started or during, I can't remember. And I in fact, I've never mentioned this in the podcast, but I participated in a mindfulness group for about 30 years. And I do find that a common thread there is that people are willing to take a level of responsibility for their own culpability. And I think at a certain level of emotional intelligence, you're not able to do that. You're a victim of every encounter with every person. So I don't know. We're going down an alley that I didn't really expect, but I think it's important. What are your thoughts about that? About selection of people that are in a community and a certain level of emotional intelligence in order to have it work?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. And I agree that, if you're in survival mode, your body is flushed with cortisol and you're kind of in this self-defense mode. So it is hard to have that inner peace, that inner calm to breathe through, reactions, triggers, and, triggers are typically from past traumas from our childhood. And I actually think that communities are a very powerful way to heal individual and collective trauma. And if we look around, if you haven't seen The Wisdom of Trauma, it is the #1 documentary that I recommend everybody who is alive watches. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't.
It's so revealing, it's so insightful, and basically so many of our world crises are basically based on the fact that there's so much trauma in our world that we're just not aware of. People don't understand trauma. There's an education about trauma. People don't understand the impacts of trauma, how to heal trauma, and it affects us in so many ways. A lot of the most powerful politicians, the greedy, it's because they weren't loved as a child. And so they're looking for this external validation to fill that need, as an example. So to come to your question of, the selection process and emotional intelligence, yes. And, I think most humans alive are really are learning this. How do we feel our emotions? How do we learn how to listen to them? Because if we don't feel them, we can't heal them. And I think, and I've talked to Guy on our podcast. I interviewed Guy, and we were talking about, how Guy Perdrix, the director of CoLive, are a powerful way to put ourselves into situations where we are forced to interact socially with people that will trigger triggers that we need to see and to heal. And if the community is designed and intentioned in a way to not judge what's coming up, but to hold space, regular circles or assemblies where people can talk about, this bothered me, or this is an issue that's coming up for me, so please have compassion because I'm going through this kind of a situation right now. We can build that compassion, we can build that emotional intelligence, we can support each other when somebody breaks down, and is going through a crisis, to bring them food, to offer an ear of support. A lot of people are so afraid of breaking down and of letting go, because there's nobody around. They're lonely. They don't have trusted friendships or a support group to do the process that needs to happen to heal. And so, yeah, I see that that's all connected, and communities are a very powerful way to support with this.
And so I can see how we need our mirrors to reflect back, to trigger us in order to grow. But we also have to have we have to have enough of a core within that community, core group of that community,
Yeah.
that has enough emotional maturity and enough clout within the community to maintain that sense of that spirit, so that it can be protected. I could see if you have too many people, let's say a hard ass, very practical nuts and bolts people, we don't have time for that crap in here, then it could poison the whole community, couldn't it?
That's true. And that's why I do agree, at least now in the beginning stages, as I don't know, co-living is it's not new because we've lived for centuries and, as in community, but it's a niche that's reshaping now based on our modern lifestyles. And it is important to curate, for people who really want to live in community and who are willing to, the effort of co-creation, of taking ownership, of taking responsibility. And that does need to come through from the beginning of communications, and through several parts of the whole journey, the whole user resident journey. So yeah, it definitely has to be a balance for sure.
Do you think there needs to be a minimum stay? If people are coming for 3 or 4 days or even a week, if you have such frequent turnover, then you're not going to get where you want to be as a community or as individuals. What are your thoughts around minimum stays?
Yeah, I've seen many examples. Some have, where most of the community stays for an extended period, several months, but then there's a few rooms that are offered for short-term stays, which is actually how we do it at Stolas. Most people stay between 4 and 8 months. We've been there for 1.5 years. We're the longest standing residents currently. And there are some people who come in short term. So yeah, ideally the community, the co-living space would offer an opportunity for even those people who come for a few days to be like, be inspired by, oh wow, there is another way of living, there is another way of relating, there is another way of eating, and can be inspired even in a few days just by how the community is, what the spaces look like, what the events are. That's the ideal. And then for those who are staying longer, they get to do some more of the deeper work that actually comes with kind of creating this different kind of a lifestyle. So yeah, it's kind of mixed. I wouldn't say one way or the other for sure.
And there's some freshness that comes from new faces and new
Yeah.
personalities and new energy coming into the space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, well, we've covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. What are some other things that I haven't asked you and you haven't had a chance to talk about that you might like to focus on, that that's important in your work with co-living?
Yeah. The importance of rituals. You know, being kind of regular activities that are organized with an intention, not just la la la, but kind of intentional. And that can happen regularly where people feel they can be a part. And ideally these rituals can be fun and playful,
Give some
dance,
examples.
yeah, dancing, singing, singing, jamming, getting around, getting instruments out, and people just kind of like goofing around, doing different sounds and playing on instruments. That is one of the most bonding experiences that I've seen really works. Dancing together as well, ecstatic dance or 5 rhythms where people are guided to release themselves and to surrender into the movement, with non-judgment, to just let go of what other people are thinking of you and not to judge others and get into that. And other playful activities, having, these are less rituals, but board games, or game nights, karaoke. But then there can, other rituals can be, around, the equinox or the solstice, more nature oriented rituals, things outside where you're giving thanks to Mother Nature, to Pachamama. There's a lot of that here in Costa Rica, that reconnection to nature, giving gratitude for everything that we're gifted, right? And the air that we breathe, the water, the food. And so there's a lot of that kind of that give and take, and rebuilding that harmony, that balance. Around the moon, we often do rituals with the moon cycle. So on the full moon, we'll do a ritual with a bonfire of letting go of fears or things that we want to just release. And on the new moon, we can set intentions for what we want to bring into our life for the next month. So things like that are just a nice kind of different way for people to connect in a more deep and intimate way.
What about food? You didn't mention food in there.
Oh my gosh, food. Okay, yes, actually, I did definitely want to mention that, because our research shows that sharing meals together is, again, one of the most powerful ways to create community bonds, because first, cooking of the food together, you get to learn, you get to talk to other people, and sharing food. It's this dedicated time when all the busyness of everything else kind of slows down, because you're eating and sharing a meal together. And actually at Stolas, we've been doing food meals from different parts of the world. So for example, a girl from Spain made Spanish tortilla, Lithuanian made Lithuanian food, the French people made some crepes, and then Costa Rican food, and that exchange of cultures and of tastes has, yeah, definitely, that's a very good one. Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah, that was just a gaping hole in that ritual.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
I would think that certain religious rituals would be nice too, if they're shared in a spirit of sharing culture.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
How
Which
about
is
movie night? How about
movie
movie
night.
nights?
That happens as well. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I have a small group and we virtually watch a movie. We watch a movie in our own space and then get together on Zoom and talk about it.
Oh, really? Love that.
So, um, okay. Well, this has been rich, and I really thank you for the time and for the work that you're doing. And it's nice that you're practicing it as a participant, and then you're sharing it and teaching it as a consultant. So I can see how both sides feed each other. And I think a tendency for some of us who tend towards leadership roles would be to be in management at your co-living space and then be a consultant. But the fact that you're a participant and consultant, I can really see how that can feed it and feed the perspective that you need as a participant and
Yeah,
consumer
exactly.
to then guide and inform your consulting. So good for you for doing both.
Yeah, no, it's a great fusion. So definitely agree with that.
Well, we'll put the website, we'll put Wisdom of Trauma in the show notes. And anything else that you'd like to share, other resources, please send us the Conscious Co-Living website. And actually, let's go ahead and list a couple things. Give us the website, best way to contact you, the Conscious Co-Living website. Give us a list of resources, and we'll put them in the show notes.
Yeah, definitely want to recommend people downloading the Community Facilitation Handbook. It's a free open source resource and talks a lot about the things that I've mentioned with examples. So
And that's at Conscious, where is it?
it's at consciouscoliving.com under resources.
Okay.
Yeah, I can
Let's also plug coliv.org, co-liv.org, an international association of co-living operators and enthusiasts. What else?
Yeah. Well, I'll be starting a series of workshops and courses and coaching, actually community coaching, for people who want to dive deeper into this whole world of community engagement, facilitation, communication skills for co-living. So we'll be sharing more details on that, but really looking forward to connecting with people in that way.
And would these skills and these trainings be appropriate for someone not necessarily in a co-living community, but for someone who's a facilitator in a spiritual group? Or in other words, I would assume these are skills that are applicable in multiple situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea is to create some of these packages in a bespoke way. So there'll be some that are more for groups, but some more individual. And yeah, I mean, definitely, the communication skills will be largely applicable to anyone who defines himself as a human.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast, and thanks to you, everyone, for tuning in. We're now doing these podcasts on a weekly basis. If you want to find out more about our organization, go to thrivecolivingcommunities.org. And there are many ways to support the podcast and what we're doing, and we'll have those in the show notes. We're also now opening up these podcasts, the recording of these podcasts, to people to participate. So we'll have a link to that. You can download a Google Calendar to find out when these will be and tune in and help me interview our guests. And then you can be in the recorded version of the podcast. So let's get back together at least on a periodic basis. We've got there are a lot of things I'd love to talk to you about. So let's get together again, and thanks for your work in the field.
Yeah, and thank you as well for all that you're doing.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next time. Thanks for joining us for another great episode of the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. To learn more about our mission and how you can support our vision of creating co-living communities worldwide, please visit us at thrivecolivingcommunities.org. To receive advanced viewings of our podcasts and other exclusive content, find us on Patreon at patreon.com/Thrive Co-Living Communities. You can also learn more ways to support our mission in the show notes below. Amazon Smile, GoFundMe, Kroger, and our own Thrive Gear store, where you can buy t-shirts, hats, and many other items. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.